In 1997, Shania Twain sat down to write a snarky, funny song about not being impressed by pretty much anything. Am I dating myself with this reference, by the way? Some of you are looking at me like, what are you talking about? Okay, this is an example from the 1900s, okay? So, if you don't get it, you've got lots of life ahead of you. Congratulations. 1997, Shania Twain. It was a hit. 20 weeks on the Billboard Top 100 charts, and it has 3 pre-choruses that go into the chorus, and each one's a little different. And the first one, she says, okay, so you're a rocket scientist, and then goes into how that doesn't impress her, which, like, by the way, like, that guy worked really hard to become a rocket scientist. I think that's really cool, you know? Like, whatever. But then the next pre-chorus is, okay, so you're Brad Pitt. That don't impress me much, which, if I may, rocket scientist to movie star is a bit of a jump. And so then for the third pre-chorus, you're like, what's she gonna say after Brad Pitt? And the third pre-chorus is, okay, so you've got a car. That don't impress me much. Now, if I was in the writer's room in 1997, and I get that I was not in the writer's room in 1997. I get that I don't deserve to be in the writer's room in 1997. She has 5 Grammys, I have 0 Grammys, okay? I get that. However, I would have a note. Like, writing 101 is when you have a series of 3 items, save the most dramatic one for last. If I'm writing that song, I'm starting with car ownership, and I'm working my way up to movie star. But I wasn't there. Anyways, it does bring up an interesting question. What impresses you? How about this question? What impresses God? See, because all throughout Mark 12, we're going to read it in just a second. I've been reading it all week, and I can't get that song out of my head every time I read it, because it's like everybody is trying to impress Jesus, and he's not impressed by any of it until the very last story, 4 verses, where Jesus stops everything, and he goes, That is what impresses me. But we have a lot of Bible to read before we get to that point. So if you have your Bibles, let's go Mark 11. We're going to read the last verse that we read last week. And so this is Jesus as he is turning over tables in the temple. Verse 17, and as he taught them, he said, is it not written, my house will be called a house of prayer for all nations, but you have made it a den of robbers. Now, verse 18, the chief priests and the teachers of the law heard this and began looking for a way to kill him, for they feared him, because the whole crowd was amazed at his teaching. This is one of the reasons why we want to slow down and work our way through Holy Week one day at a time. We want you to feel the tension and the conflict. They're not just angry, they are livid. They are looking for a way to kill Jesus. Verse 19, when evening came, Jesus and his disciples went out of the city. So remember the cadence of Holy Week is Bethany was 2 miles away from Jerusalem, and they would spend their nights at Bethany, and then they would walk in the morning, and they would hang out in Jerusalem during the day, and then they'd walk back to Bethany in the evening. And so if you remember, on Monday, they walk in and they spend the day in Jerusalem. And now verse 19 just told us that when evening came, they walked back out. Verse 20, in the morning, so this is now Tuesday morning, as they went along, and by the way, the cross is on Friday. And so we're getting close. It's Tuesday morning. In the morning, as they went along, they saw the fig tree withered from the roots. Peter remembered and said to Jesus, Rabbi, look, the fig tree you cursed has withered. Now, allow me to be a Bible nerd for a couple of minutes. This is called a Markan sandwich. Because in Mark's gospel, we just named it after Mark, because in Mark's gospel, 9 times he tells a Jesus story, and then he sandwiches it with another Jesus story. So he takes one story, he cuts it in half, and that serves as like the 2 pieces of bread. And then he tells the Jesus story in the middle that the 2 other stories are pointing to. And so what we have here is the story of Jesus cursing the fig tree being the 2 pieces of bread. And on Monday morning, Jesus talks to the tree. And then on Tuesday morning, Peter notices that all of the leaves have withered. But those are just the 2 pieces of bread, and in between, it's all pointing to Jesus clearing the temple. Like we talked about last week, just because the tree looks like it should be bearing fruit, you got to see if it's actually bearing fruit. And if it's not, well, then it's an awful lot like the temple that is active and has a whole bunch of movement and looks like it should be bearing fruit, and yet it's not bearing any fruit. Mark does this 9 times in his gospel. And so as you go back and read through it this week, which I encourage you to do, you'll start to see it everywhere. It's a really cool way. Jesus was just so thoughtful in every single thing that he did. But point is, on Tuesday morning, the leaves have withered. The leaves of the fig tree have withered. Keep that thought in the back of your mind for about 5 minutes. We got to keep moving forward because Easter is coming. Here we go. Mark 11, verse 27. They arrived again in Jerusalem, and while Jesus was walking in the temple courts, the chief priests and the teachers of the law and the elders came to him. So they finished the 2-mile walk. They get into the temple courts where yesterday he flipped over all the tables, and today everybody is waiting for him, and everybody wants a word with him, and everybody is trying to trap him. And everybody is as I was reading it today, this week, I just kept thinking like that thing that us spiritual people do where we're trying to show each other how smart we are, so it's like we're trying to trap him, but we're really trying to impress this person over there and trying to impress the crowd over there. It's like there's this like big religious game happening. And when you read it, Jesus walks into every single one of those conversations and handles every single one of them like the Savior of the world. Like there's a question that some religious leaders ask about authority. And then there's another question that the Sadducees ask about marriage and the resurrection. They're like asking all of the big questions. And Jesus just keeps answering them one after another after another. So I just want to focus on one of those stories today. This one is about a story about the Pharisees and the Herodians asking Jesus about paying taxes. Yep, we're back to taxes. Tax day is coming up. April 15th, don't forget. I don't know why that's the theme of all of this. Here we go. Mark 12, verse 13. Later, they sent some of the Pharisees and Herodians to Jesus to catch him in his words. Now, every verse of scripture can just be unpacked for hours and hours and hours, including this one. We won't do a whole series on this verse, but a couple of minutes on it. First, we have the Pharisees and we have the Herodians, and they're joining together, they're teaming up to try to catch Jesus in his words. You're probably asking, okay, who are the Herodians and who are the Pharisees? Really glad you asked. Let's talk about it. First, when you see Herodians in the gospel, think King Herod. So it was a group of people who were supporting King Herod. Now, King Herod was a client king, which means Rome ruled the known world, and this guy named Caesar was in charge of all of it, but he would put kings in charge of different regions. And the king in charge of this region, in charge of Judea, was this man named Herod. Now, you may remember that name from the Christmas story. I preached a sermon in December called Christmas and Control. That was all about King Herod because Herod was holding on to his throne with everything that he had. And he tried to eliminate anybody who was a threat to him, including killing members of his own family to protect his throne. He was a bad guy. And so you can imagine when some wise men showed up and said, hey, we're here to worship the new King of Kings. He was just born in Bethlehem. That Herod didn't like that very much. And if you know the story, he tries to have him killed, and it's a whole thing. Well, that Herod passes away, but his son, another Herod, and just as bad, a lot of Herods going on, is now on the throne. And the Herodians were his followers. And so, as you can imagine, Herod didn't like Jesus very much. And so guess what? The Herodians really didn't like Jesus. And so they're showing up and they're trying to trap him. There's another group, the Pharisees. Now, the Pharisees are completely different than the Herodians. They wouldn't have seen eye to eye on pretty much anything. The Pharisees were all about the law. Easiest way to think about it is the law in the Old Testament, the 613 laws. They wanted to keep those laws, and then they wanted to become even more strict about them. Like they're like, okay, we have the 613 here, but we didn't do a good job in our past of keeping those, and then everything fell apart, and the Israelites end up in exile in Babylon. So when they came back, and during the period of time between the Old Testament and the New Testament, this group called the Pharisees emerged, where they go, okay, we're not just going to keep those 613 laws. We're going to come up with a whole bunch of other laws to create like a fence, a hedge around those 613 so that we don't even get close to breaking one of those. And so they made it even stricter. Now, the Pharisees get kind of a bad rep as we read because they got off as they went. But the heart posture behind that originally was pure. It was holiness. It's just that righteousness can become self-righteousness real quick. And so Jesus had some words for him. The point is, ever since like really Mark chapter 2, the Pharisees did not like Jesus. Mark chapter 2 is that story where the man gets carried by his friends and they cut a hole in the roof and lower him down to get healing. And Jesus looks at him and says, "Son, your sins are forgiven." And the Pharisees are like, whoa, 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 whoa. You don't have authority to do that, Jesus. Only God has authority to do that. And to be fair, they're right. Only God has authority to do that. What they don't realize is that Jesus is Lord, that Jesus is God. And so that's the story that unfolds. The Pharisees don't like Jesus for that reason. So my point is the Herodians and the Pharisees both don't like Jesus, both don't like each other. There's this funny story, and it's not funny, it made me laugh. The irony isn't it ironic? Luke 13:31 is this. At that time, some Pharisees came to Jesus and said to him, "Leave this place and go somewhere else. Herod wants to kill you." So this was earlier on in Jesus' ministry. The Pharisees are like, "Look, Jesus, we don't like you, but the Herodians really don't like you. And so even though we don't like you, we feel like we should warn you about this. Like, you should get out of here." Okay? So point is, Herodians, Pharisees, they don't like each other. But what's that saying? The enemy of my enemy, right, is my friend. And so they find, during Holy Week, they find some common ground. And they're like, okay, let's both put aside our differences because Jesus is our common enemy and we need to do something. And so the best Herodians and the best Pharisees get together and they come up with the best question that they can to try to trap Jesus. Are you with me so far? All right, verse 14. They came to him and said, "Teacher, we know that you are a man of integrity. You aren't swayed by others because you pay no attention to who they are." I love it. They're like, by this point, we know you're not impressed by any of us. You just are who you are in every situation. You're a man of integrity. You're the same in every room that you walk into, which, my goodness, what a great North Star for all of us to chase. You aren't swayed by others because you pay no attention to who they are, but you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. And now here comes the trap. Is it right to pay the imperial tax to Caesar or not? Should we pay or shouldn't we? Now, there was lots of taxes in the first century. One of them was this imperial tax that Rome charged so that they can continue to fund their military and pay Herod and everything that goes into running the world. And it was making life really difficult for the people in the first century. And so they're in the temple court, and a Herodian and a Pharisee just asked Jesus, should we pay this tax? Here's why it's a brilliant play on their end. They're putting Jesus into a corner. Because if Jesus is to say, yes, pay the tax, well, then the Pharisee is going to go, I knew it. This guy is just a pawn of Rome. He's not the King of Kings. He's not the Lord of Lords. He's just here to point us back to Rome. But if Jesus says, no, don't pay it, the Herodian will have grounds to arrest him pretty much immediately, and Jesus will go to the cross on Tuesday instead of on Friday. And so Jesus is in this tough situation where he can't say yes and he can't say no. Maybe you've been in some situations like that over the years. They're not fun to be in. By the way, study the words of Jesus, because he was phenomenal at handling these types of situations. Let's read what Jesus says. But Jesus knew their hypocrisy. Why are you trying to trap me? I always just picture Jesus just so at ease. Like if I'm in that situation, I'm so nervous, you know? And Jesus, I just picture him smiling, knowing the hypocrisy, knowing the religious game that they're playing. And he goes, why are you trying to trap me? Bring me a denarius and let me look at it. Now, that was a Roman coin that had the inscription of Caesar on it. And so it was worth a day's wage. Hard to know exactly what that would mean in 21st century. We think somewhere around like $50 for this coin. But it had Caesar's picture on it. So the Pharisees wouldn't even touch it It was idolatry to them. So when Jesus asked that question, he probably looks at the Pharisees first, and they're like, we don't have one. And he looks over at the Herodians like, I bet you guys do though, huh? And so he says, he asked for a coin, and they bring him a coin. Verse 16, they brought the coin, and he asked them, whose image is this? And whose inscription? Caesar's, they reply. Verse 17, then Jesus said to them, then give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's. And they were amazed at him. They were amazed by him. We hear that story and we're like, huh? What are you talking about? Why are they so amazed? Why, that seemed like a non-answer. You know, like what is going on here? Let me see if I can explain this a bit, because we have 2,000 years of distance between us and this story. The key word in what Jesus just said, his brilliant chess move, is the word image. Now, again, we hear that and we're like, okay. But to a group of religious leaders in the first century who had the Old Testament pretty much memorized, they would have known exactly what Jesus is saying when he says the word image, whose image is on the coin. What they would know is that Jesus is calling back to the very first page of the Bible, to Genesis 1 and verse 27, that says this. So God created human beings in his own what? Image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. He created them. Jesus is going, hey, don't you remember that you are created in the image of God? And so what he does, it's such a brilliant move. He goes, give me a coin. Let me see that coin. Because you guys are always worried about money and taxes and all of these questions that you have. Let me see one of those coins. Okay, whose image is that? And they all said, Caesar's. So he says, okay, great. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's. And then he says, now whose image is on you? Do you see the chess move? He's going, money's just whatever. Money's a thing. But what's more important is whose image is on you, and the answer is God's. You're created in the image of God. So why are we getting so caught up in all of these complicated questions? Just give to God what is God's. In other words, pay your taxes. Great, sure. We're doing something so much bigger than that, because you are created in the image of God. He's reminding them, hey, we're not God, but we are created in the image of God, here to reflect God's glory to the best of our ability. It's just that sometimes we forget that, and we get so caught up in the world and all the different things that we're supposed to do to try to survive. And Jesus is going, fine, give to Caesar what is Caesar's. That's fine. There'll be more money. We'll figure it out. But give to God what is God's. In other words, lay down everything at God's feet. That's why they're so amazed at what he's doing. See, the first 3 chapters of the Bible set the stage for all of it. And it's God creating humans in his image. And Adam and Eve are living in perfect harmony with each other and with their creator and with creation, and everything is good until Genesis 3, when they decide, hey, I want to try to be my own God. I want to decide what's right and wrong for myself. And in that chapter, you can go read it this week, Genesis 3, everything falls apart. They immediately start blaming each other. They immediately start hiding, and then they hear God's voice and they run and they hide and they sew fig leaves together to try to cover up. They go from knowing that I'm good, being just made in the image of God, to, oh no, I've got shame and I'm not enough and I got to try to cover up. And I would argue that was the invention of us trying to impress one another. And ever since, we continue to do the same thing. It's just that our fig leaves that we use have become way more robust. Now it's like, hey, if I can just be funny enough, then maybe people will like me. Oh, if I can just be attractive enough, if I can just be strong enough, if I can just be smart enough, if I can just be rich enough, if I can just get enough fig leaves together, then maybe people will look at me and they'll see my accomplishments and they'll see the things that I've done, and then maybe they'll accept me and give me a seat at the table. What I feel like Jesus is doing in the temple, in the middle of Holy Week, is he's going, hey, I've got an invitation for you. Whose image is on the coin? Caesar. Great. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's. But whose image is on you? God's. And so what if you laid down all of that and surrendered all of the ways that you're trying to impress me right now, and we're okay with realizing that you're a human being created in the image of God, that you matter. And so let's stop trying to trick each other and trap each other like the hypocrisy that he sensed, and let's just be together. What Jesus is saying here is so layered and it's so brilliant. But the takeaway is this: what impresses Jesus? Let's surrender. It's surrender. What impresses Jesus is anytime anyone's willing to go, okay, I'm done trying to play the game. I'm done trying to impress. I'm done trying to earn my seat at the table. I'm ready to just lay all of that down and just realize I'm another imperfect person, but I'm created in the image of God, and so here I am. That's impressive to Jesus. He says it like this in Mark 8:35. Whoever wants to save their life, whoever wants to try to control their life, whoever wants to try to have clenched fists around their life will lose it. But whoever loses their life for me and for the gospel, well, that's how you save it. That's how you find your life. The starting point is surrender. As we go through life, it's unintentional. We just start grabbing on to so many different things. And Jesus goes, it always just comes back to surrender. It always comes back to surrender. What impresses God? Surrender. The most clear example of this is Mark 10, a story that happened like a couple of days before this story that we just read. So a couple of days before Holy Week, as they're on their way to Jerusalem for the triumphal entry, Jesus has an encounter with a man who is rich and who is powerful and who has managed to do all of that at a very young age. We don't even know his name. We just call him the rich young ruler. And if you know the story, it's in Mark 10. He comes running up to Jesus and he goes, look, I'm rich, I'm powerful, and I've managed to do all of it under the age of 30, or whatever it is. Like I've accomplished it all so soon. Aren't you impressed by me? And it's one of the most beautiful verses in Scripture. It's Mark 10, verse 21. It says, Jesus looked at him and loved him. I just picture Jesus like, man, you're trying. You're really trying. I love you for that. And then just continues to deconstruct his entire narrative, where it's like, hey, yes, I am impressed by you, but it's not because you're rich, and it's not because you have power, and it's not because you've managed to do all of this early on in your career. It's because you're made in the image of God. It's because you're a human being. All that other stuff, those are just fig leaves that you are hiding behind because you're not ready to just be yourself in front of me. So Jesus gives him this invitation. He goes, I'll tell you what, go sell all of it. Like liquidate and sell it all. Give it away, give it to the poor, and then come follow me. Think about that. This rich young ruler, he could have been with Jesus into Holy Week. He could have been right beside him as he rode into Jerusalem. He could have been right there as he's flipping tables over in the temple. He could have heard all of these conversations firsthand. He gives him an invitation to come follow him. But the man can't do it because he thinks that his fig leaves are too impressive. I've got a lot of possessions though. Says to the one who created everything, Like he can't, and this is hard. We're gonna talk about you in just a second. Like, it's real. It's real. Like we all do this at some level. We hide behind these elaborate costumes that we create. And Jesus just looks at him in love and goes, you can come, I want you to come follow me, but first you're gonna have to drop the act. You're gonna have to surrender. And he can't do it. Now, it's easy to talk about somebody 2,000 years ago. Let's talk about you. So this person was rich, young, and the ruler. A modern day version of that may be rich, young, and have a ton of influence, ton of followers. And like influence, hear me, is a phenomenal tool if you've learned to surrender it. If you haven't surrendered it, it will drive you to the ground. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually it will drive you to the ground. Listen, humans aren't created to carry that type of glory. Jesus is the only one who is able to handle that type of glory, which means our job is to surrender it and lay it down daily. But if you can do that, if you can operate from a place of, it's surrendered, then all of a sudden it becomes this amazing tool that you can use for good. But you got to surrender it, and you got to do it daily. And now you're asking, well, how do I know if I've surrendered it or not? Well, how often do you talk about it? How often do you think about it? How do you feel when the numbers are trending in the right direction? How do you feel when the numbers are trending in the wrong direction? Anger, sadness, mad. How dare they stop and follow me? I can't believe it. It's all just symptoms. Doug and I taught a master class on having a sound mind a couple years ago, and we were reading the triumphal entry story. And we were reading about how they're like coming into Jerusalem and everybody's shouting, Hosanna, save us. And how like Jesus' disciples, I'm just imagining, are there just like, finally, people are realizing it. The movement's working. Our followers are going up. This is amazing. But you just see Jesus and he's just sort of like, okay. Like, not really all that high on the praise. And what we realize is that's because the same people that were shouting, save us on Sunday, were then shouting, crucify him on Friday. And Doug's brilliant line that he came up with is, hey, if you live by their applause, you will die by their critique. And the crowd's always gonna have both, trust me. And so surrendering that influence that you have looks like laying that down, both when times are good and when times are bad, to go, that's not where I find my identity anymore. And if you can learn to surrender it, then it becomes this amazing tool. Or how about money? It also says that he's rich, which means he's wealthy. And money is a great tool if you've surrendered it. If you haven't, my goodness, it will drive you to the ground. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually. It's too heavy of a burden to try to carry. Hey, money can buy you some pretty cool fig leaves to hide behind, but they're temporary. I love that on the way to the temple on Tuesday morning, Peter goes, look, the fig leaves, they've withered. And I just see Jesus smiling like, yep, you'll see. You'll see. Because money can get you some really cool ways to try to show the world like, look, I'm okay, right? But what Jesus is giving us an invitation to is laying down all of that, surrendering all of that and going, no, I start from the place of, I'm a son, I'm a daughter. I'm here and I matter, not because of what I bring to the table, but just because of who I am. And if you can start from that place of surrender, then my goodness, money can become this incredible tool for the kingdom. All throughout the New Testament, the unsung heroes are all of the rich, surrendered people, the kingdom builders, like Lydia, the successful businesswoman who gets saved in Philippi. And the Apostle Paul wants to start this church in Philippi. And she's like, oh, I've got a house. I've got money. I can fund this. I can help get this church plant going. And then 10 years later, the Apostle Paul writes this letter back to that thriving church, and we call it Philippians, and we're still reading from it today. Lydia was a huge part of building the kingdom. Why? Because she was wealthy and surrendered. So I'm not saying that it can't be both. I'm saying you can be both. It just takes a lot of work, and it takes daily, constant reminders that surrender is what impresses Jesus. And then real quick, it also mentions that he's young. And so let's talk about age and let's talk about time. Especially in a city like Austin, right? Where so much of what we talk about is like, here's longevity. Here's how to be healthy. Here's how you can look younger. Well, here's my chronological age is this, but my biological age is this. Two things, both important. I love that. Like we only have one life to live. Our bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit. Let's take care of them. Get your sleep. Drink your gallon of water. Get outside, exercise, all of the, take care of yourself. That's so important, and I'm all for it, and I'm happy for you. Number two, we're all gonna die. And both are important. And if you miss it on either side, you will swing the pendulum to one side or the other. Right? Because all of that longevity stuff and Chris Hemsworth limitless and here's how you can have lots of energy and live a whole lot longer. I am all for it. Until it becomes an exercise in denying our own mortality. And then I think it's really important that we stop and we go, yes, let's do that. Let's exercise, let's take care of ourselves. And this side of eternity, it's finite. I was having dinner with my friends Brett and Allie on Tuesday, and she's an optometrist. And we were talking about how one of the things the conversations she's always trying to navigate is she'll have people coming into her office who like their eyesight's going on them, getting worse. And they'll come into her office and be like, okay, doc, what's the cure and what's the cause? What's the cause and what's the cure? What happened? What did I do wrong? Tell me what I need to fix. And then we're gonna fix this and we're gonna make it better. And like, she's brilliant and she's a doctor. And so she does that and she can help a lot. But really like underneath that, these are my words, not hers. She says this in a much better way, is like, hey, the cause is like you're getting older. Like that's what happens. But we become like allergic to that. It's like, no, it must be something I'm eating. It must be my stress. It must be something, give me something that I can control. And I promise I will tackle this next mountain. And it's like, I love how proactive you're being. I really do. Like let's keep moving forward and believe that we can get better tomorrow and all of that. And let's sober up to the reality that life this side of eternity is finite. Mark 8:35, throw it up one more time. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it. I'm going to say this for the 10th time. All for it, man. Let's take care of ourselves. But how much of that movement gets caught up in the first half of this equation? You try so hard to save your life that you get to the end of it and you realize you forgot to live and you forgot what really mattered and what was really important along the way. Jesus gives another option, but if you lose your life, if you lay your life down and surrender for me and for the gospel, you will save it. Jesus goes, surrender. That impresses me much. Oh. When you keep reading Mark 12, you see over and over and over again. Then next up are the Sadducees. Next up, like there's all of these people who are trying to trap Jesus and nobody can do it. And then eventually there's this beautiful verse where it's like from there on out, nobody dared ask him any more questions. And then you get to the end of Mark 12. And I picture this. We lose the chronology a little bit. I'm speculating here because Mark stops giving us hints. I picture Mark 12, the end of Mark 12, I could be wrong, at the end of Tuesday, at the end of a long day where everyone was trying to impress Jesus. And then we're going to read this story. It's 4 verses long, verse 41. Jesus sat down opposite the place where the offerings were put and watched the crowd putting their money into the temple treasury. Many rich people threw in large amounts. Verse 42, but a poor widow came and put in 2 very small copper coins worth only a few cents. I love this. Verse 43, calling his disciples to him. He goes, hey, guys, come here. Watch what's happening right now. Jesus said, truly I tell you, this poor widow has put more into the treasury than all the others. They all gave out of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, put in everything, all she had to live on. That gets Jesus' attention. So much so that he stops everything and he goes, hey, all these games that everyone's trying to play, don't worry about those. This is what matters. Now, we know very little. We have very little backstory about this story. We don't know who she is. We don't know what she's been through, except that she's experienced some really tragic events and that she's hurting. And what I see in this story and what I want to focus on is really what she did. What was at some point, it feels like she's at the end of the line and like she's tried everything and she's heartbroken and financially she's not doing great. And who knows whether some of it was her fault, I'm sure lots of it wasn't. Who knows what all is going on, doesn't matter. What matters is that she shows up and she goes, I'm done trying to do this my way. God, I give this to you as a sacrifice. And Jesus goes, yes. What impresses Jesus? It's very simple. Surrender and sacrifice. Surrender and sacrifice. See, because we all understand rock bottom at some level, don't we? Like we all know that place that you get to where you go, I've tried everything on my power and it didn't work. And now I'm out of energy and I'm out of answers and I don't know where to go from here. And that, Jesus is saying, is actually a beautiful invitation to come back to the altar and go, okay, but I'm laying it down here. I'm trusting you, God. So as we were talking about this story as a staff, Emily was like, well, we got to sing this song about coming to the altar. And then we decided, hey, we should just get crazy and do an altar call. Now, a whole bunch of things just happened in this room and up and overflow and ladies at Lane Murray unit. So let's back up for a second. Some of you are like, finally. Others of you are like, I have no idea what an altar call is. What are you even talking about? Altar call is just a very beautiful exercise of taking a step out of your seat and coming up to the front to leave a sacrifice, to leave a surrender, to surrender something, to leave something behind. Because remember, Jesus flipped the tables in the temple as if to say, all of this points to me. I am the sacrifice once and for all. That was last week. Now he invites us to give him everything, to lay everything back down. Not for salvation, but for freedom. We go, okay, Jesus, because of what you did for me, now I just want to bring everything back up to the altar. And so in a few minutes, you're going to have a chance to do that. And first off, completely optional. Everybody exhale. I feel it. There's like I'm like, oh no, you're fine. The Holy Spirit will meet you in your seat. Like you're good. But there will be some people up here in a few minutes as we start to worship who are just ready to pray for you. There'll be some people up in overflow who are ready to pray for you. Ladies at Lane Murray unit, you throw your hand up in the air. We'll have a team of people who will come and pray for you in a couple of minutes. But here's there's so many different examples and there's so many different stories and everybody has their own. And so I could never cover every ground, but let me give just a few. Man, I had my life changed dramatically at an altar call several years ago where I was a pastor in California and I was building a really great ministry out there that I was really proud of, and I had this awesome community, and I had an apartment a block away from the beach. And then Doug and Ethan and I had this idea to come plant a Red Rocks church, and I was so excited. And there was a piece of me that's like, but I've worked so hard, here. And there's actually people coming to this church, why would we start another church where nobody knows about it? And all of those questions. And then Pastor Sean was preaching in Denver, and he gave an altar call, gave an invitation. And I felt so strongly like God was saying, hey buddy, this chapter that we've been writing has been really good and well done, but it's coming to a close. And are you ready to trust me to end that chapter and start a brand new one? And so I'm up front and I'm crying and I'm a mess. And yet all these years later, I look back and I'm like, I'm so glad that I did. Maybe for you, it's the thing that you need to surrender. It is a career dream that you've been chasing and trying for and working so hard, and it just feels like you're pushing a boulder up a hill, and then you almost get there and you trip and it falls back down and you have to start all over again. Maybe today what you need to do is just come to the altar and surrender and sacrifice and go, God, I've tried everything my way. I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I want to just lay this before you. Would you take the wheel? Would you be in charge of this? Now you can take the dream away, or you can refine it, or you can change it, or whatever. I can't do it anymore. Surrender and sacrifice. Single people. I talk to single people all the time who will say yeah, I know, Ryan, it's cool. You talk about singleness, but I want to be married so bad. And what I always say is great. Yes, that's a God-given desire. I want that for you too. I pray every morning, constantly, that the single people who want to be married will continue to find the right people. I wrote single today as a companion along the singleness journey to realize, hey, but if today you are single, then you have an opportunity to surrender and sacrifice where you're at now and lay that all down and go, but I'm going to live to the best of my ability and follow Jesus as best as I can here and now. Or parents. I'm not a parent. I can't imagine how difficult it must be. And when it comes to all the variables that come to raising kids, my goodness. All throughout Scripture, there's all of these opportunities and invitations for people to surrender their kids. I think like Hannah wanting so bad for a son, and his name's Samuel, and then gets asked to let go and have Eli, this man named Eli, raise Samuel because God had a calling on his life. And Samuel goes on to become one of the most important prophets. The story of David is all about Samuel raising up this guy, and he goes on to be a king after God's own heart. All that to say, I don't know all of the variables that go into it, but I do know there's an invitation to surrender and sacrifice, where you just go, okay, God, I'm just going to trust you. I'm just going to trust that you have got this. Again, there's 1,000 examples. Whatever's going on in your heart, I'm just going to trust that the Lord's going to speak to you. And if today is a day where you just need to come up to the altar and pray with somebody, hey, maybe it's something as simple as, I can't forgive somebody. Would you pray for me? That's an act of surrender and sacrifice. Is you walking up and going, I just need help. I need help, and I need to say this out loud. It's a step of courage.